Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I am so glad that you are taking the time to listen, and I hope that you are going to enjoy this discussion. I'm really looking forward to it because today we're going to discuss how to prepare students who have social challenges for re-entry into a full school day that is likely to happen in the fall. So we're recording this in 2021. It's summertime now. In a couple months, the students will be going back to school. They've been off. Many have been off and doing hybrid learning or remote learning due to the pandemic. And with schools preparing to fully reopen in the fall, some students, particularly those who have had social challenges or those who have been bullied in the past, may not feel equipped to deal with the social demands. So how do we prepare them for this transition? Well, my guest today is Dr. Elizabeth Laugeson, and she has the answers. And those answers are evidence-based and fantastic. Dr. Laugeson is an associate clinical professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Biobehavioral Sciences at the UCLA Semel Institute, and she's a licensed clinical psychologist. She's also the founder and director of the UCLA PEERS Clinic, which is an outpatient parent-assisted social skills training program for individuals with autism spectrum disorder and those who have other social difficulties. It is an absolute honor to have her on the podcast.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Dr. Laugeson, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I am so thrilled that you are here. There's so much to talk about as we prepare for students re-entering school in person in the fall. And, I wanted to talk to you because you do a lot of work with social skills, with social emotional health of students, and also bullying. And those are a lot of hot topics as we think about this transition back to school. We've heard a lot about students who really struggled with remote learning, but for others, it was really a gift because it eliminated the social challenges that they were facing before, and they got a break from bullying. And now with schools preparing to reopen in the fall, some students are worried, and those who had social challenges before the pandemic may not feel equipped to deal with the social demands again. I'd love to open it up with, how do we prepare them for this yet another transition?
Yeah, there's so many elements there that we need to prepare them for. I always like to try to set kids up for success, right? So to give them some tools and some strategies for things like making and keeping friends to start with. Bullying is a whole separate thing we can talk about. But, in terms of friendship development, a lot of kids, they've been socially isolated for the last year. They haven't been interacting with their peers. Some kids are even going to new schools in the fall where they don't know anybody. And so we want to teach them what socially successful teenagers do to make friends. And, there's several parts to this, but the first part is just having access to peers that could be potentially friends. The next part of that is knowing how to engage those peers and meet them, essentially. And then the third part is to develop stronger, more meaningful friendships, which involves things like get-togethers. So one of the things that parents should really be thinking about as their kids are going back to school this fall is, where will they find those friends? And most kids do that through extracurricular activities at school or in the community. And so thinking about, what is it that my kid loves to do? What do they enjoy? Maybe what they're good at? And where can I find other kids that also like the same things? And the reason that this is important is that friendships are based on common interests. Right? So think about that. Think about who you're friends with or who you've been friends with. You probably have things in common with them. And those are the things that you talk about when you're together. And those are the things that you do when you're together. And so thinking about, if your kid is into gaming, is there a gaming club at school? If they're into computers and technology, is there a computer club or a tech club? If they're into anime, maybe there's an anime club. But figuring out what what their interests are and where they could find other people. The next step will have to be, well, how are they going to engage people in these?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And it just seems like, again, aligning their interests with those activities are really important, especially now where, I have a lot of parents come into my office for evaluations and all their children are interested in, their adolescents are interested in is gaming. And they want them to have real relationships, away from a screen. They want to have that face-to-face interaction. And it's a challenge for so many parents right now to get their children to engage face to face now that they can, because, they feel a little more comfortable behind a screen, some kids now.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. I talk to a lot of families too, where the parent wants them to again, get away from the screen, away from the video games. Like, let's find something else. And they almost try to expand their child's interests. And I actually have a different way of looking at this. If this is their interest, I want to move towards that. And I want to find other people that have those same interests in real life as well. I mean, people that they can talk to about gaming and do gaming with. And we also have to teach them how to interact and have conversations outside of just gaming. But I think it's all right if kids, spend time doing the things that they enjoy, as long as they're doing them with other people. So I don't think we have to fight that interest. I think that's actually a losing battle. I think what we need to do is actually embrace that interest, but find other people that have those same interests. And then what you're going to find is that conversations become pretty easy when you're talking to people that you have things in common with. They're not that effortful. If you're really geeking out about something you love, it's easier to talk to people. And that's how friendships begin to develop. So I would say don't fight that interest. We'll have to teach them to avoid things like parallel play. So, parallel play, we often think of young children sort of playing side by side, but not interacting with each other. And, at certain early ages of childhood, that's developmentally appropriate. But teenagers also engage in parallel play. And it's often in the form of things like video games or computer games, maybe just being on their phone. And so we're not going to endorse that. That's obviously not really developing a connection with someone. But we can create rules about that. When they're having get-togethers, like limiting the amount of time that they play video games and, making sure that there's time to do other things, maybe, share a meal together and do other activities. But, again, friendships are based on common interests. And so we have to embrace that.
Absolutely. And, before you even, figure out that you have interests in common with other students and other peers, you have to kind of initiate contact with those children and adolescents. And for some students, that's really hard. When, you mentioned students might be starting at a new school, or they may have been in remote learning for a year, and now they're entering a classroom with a lot of unfamiliar peers. How do you help students initially establish those connections?
Yeah, I love the question. Thank you for that question. Because that is the next step. It's not just enrolling them in extracurricular activities. It's helping them to know how to engage people there. So here's something interesting, Karen. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to flip this for a second. Because I noticed that, really well-intentioned adults will sometimes give kids not great advice about how to socially engage other people. So imagine you have this kid who's going to this extracurricular activity for the first time. They've never met anybody before. What do you think that most adults will tell that kid to do to meet new people?
They will tell that child to go and introduce yourself.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Go up and say hi. Go up and introduce yourself. But have you ever thought about what that would look like? Imagine I just walk up to you and I say, "Hi, I'm Liz." What are you going to think of me? That's kind of random. It's that's not really what people do, truthfully. Right. It's the advice that people give, but it's actually not what most of us would do. And so instead, what we want to do is sort of figure out, well, what do socially successful people do? Let's break that down into some steps that we can teach our kids. So it kind of depends on if you're sort of starting an individual conversation with someone or if you're entering a conversation. Let's use the example of entering a conversation because that's a little harder. Right. So imagine you go to this extracurricular activity. You've never met these people before. You want to talk to people. Well, the first thing you do is you sort of listen to the conversation, right? And you're maybe kind of looking over a little bit from a distance, but you're not staring at the group, right? Because that would look a little creepy. So instead, people will use a phone or a prop or something to look distracted by, like you're looking at a text message or something, but you're eavesdropping. You just don't want to look like you're eavesdropping. So then let's say you figure out the topic. You have to know something about the topic. Otherwise, you're just going to slow down the conversation. But let's say you have a common interest. So you're not going to just, yell from across the room. Right? What are you going to do with your body? You're going to move a little bit closer, right?
Right.
No, not too close. Usually nothing closer than an arm's length away. You don't want to barge into the conversation and interrupt things. So what do you wait for? A little pause in the conversation. And then you mention the topic, right? You either make a comment or you ask a question or you give a compliment, but it's on topic. The next thing you have to do is you have to start assessing the group's interest. Because right now you're just a visitor in this conversation. You don't know if you've been accepted. So here's an interesting thing. I ask people all the time, how can you tell if, someone or a group of people wants to talk to you? And most people will say it's a feeling that they get. But, for a lot of our kids, they're not hardwired with that feeling that some of us get. But the reality is there are concrete behaviors that we're picking up on that give us the feeling. And that we can explain. So imagine this. Imagine you're trying to join a conversation. What would the group be doing with their eyes if they wanted to talk to you?
They'd be looking at you. They might move their body so that they're facing you. They might show some interest in the way their expressions are.
Yeah, exactly. So they would be looking at you. That's the first thing, and not rolling your eyes or making a face. You mentioned that they'd be facing you, right? So their bodies would be turned towards you, not giving you the cold shoulder, kind of turning away. And they would actually be talking to you, right? And not giving short replies or rude comments. Those are 3 behavioral signs that tell us if we're accepted or not accepted, right? They're looking at us, they're facing us, they're talking to us. This other thing happens too, where people will talk in a group. When they talk in a group, they're kind of talking in a circle. I don't know if you ever noticed that. And what do they do with the circle if they want to talk to you? They open the circle, right? What do they do if they don't want to talk to you? They close that circle, right? They give you the cold shoulder. Well, let's say things are going well and they seem to be accepting. Then we can introduce ourselves, right? Introductions come later. They don't come at the beginning. So we have to equip our kids to know how to interact in these social environments. It's not just enough to put them in an activity with people with common interests, but now we have to teach them how to engage with others.
Absolutely. And it seems that once those kids understand how to engage, how to, introduce themselves, how to get into that initial conversation so that they can make contact, then that anxiety level decreases at the same time because they're not wondering what people are thinking. Am I going to say the right thing? What do I do? They have the tools and the skills to be able to initiate that conversation.
Absolutely. We do a ton of research on our program. I think decades of research and that shows that, as you build up social competence, you find that kids become more socially confident, but also less socially anxious. And it's not even something that we're targeting in our program, but we really do see nice decreases in social anxiety. I think for the reason that you just described, if you go into a situation and you have a plan, a little roadmap for how this is supposed to go, and you're putting them in an environment where they already have things in common with people, right? Then you're setting them up for success. And that's definitely going to improve things like social anxiety. But now imagine that you send a kid to one of these activities and you tell them to go up and say hi and go up and introduce themselves. What would that, if you did that, imagine that. You went in and said, hi, I'm Karen. And you saw that the group was, looking at you like that was really strange. What would that do to your social anxiety?
Right. That anxiety level would increase and I'd probably kind of ease myself away from the group and feel really bad.
Yeah. And then would you want to go back to that activity?
Absolutely not.
Oh.
Absolutely not. That child would not want to go back to camp or that activity.
Exactly. So what ends up happening is that the advice we give is so critical, because if we're giving advice that really doesn't work in the real world, what's going to happen is our kids are going to take us up on that advice. They're going to discover it doesn't work. They're going to become more anxious. And what do people do when they're socially anxious? They disengage. Right? And now they don't want to go back to camp, or they don't want to go back to that extracurricular activity. So again, this is why it's so, so important that the advice we give is really based in, what people who are successful in these situations do.
Absolutely. And, many of the strategies that you've described are from the PEERS program that you alluded to. And so for listeners who aren't familiar with the program, could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so PEERS, it's an acronym. It stands for the Program for the Education and Enrichment of Relational Skills. I initially developed the program back in 2004 at UCLA, and it was designed for teens on the autism spectrum. And back in 2004, there really weren't any programs in the community even for teens with autism. And so we saw this as an area of, there was a gap in terms of services, but the program's expanded quite a bit since then. So now we not only work with teens with autism, but really any teen that's struggling socially. We also have a young adult program, again, for anyone who sort of wants to learn the skills related to making and keeping friends. And also dating etiquette is another area that we focus on for particularly young adults. We have a new program called PEERS for Careers, which is a college to career transition program for right now adults in the spectrum, but I'm sure will expand in the future. And then we also have a preschool program. It's called PEERS for Preschoolers. And what's unique about these programs is that, first of all, they're evidence-based. So what that means is that we have a lot of research that shows that they're effective. And that's very important in the world of social skills training, because unfortunately, most research suggests that social skills training doesn't tend to be very effective. But think about it. The average kind of maybe social skills program in the community is probably telling kids to do things like go up and say hi or go up and introduce themselves. It's a lot of well-intentioned adults and professionals that just, are doing what they were probably told to do, but doesn't necessarily mean that's what they would do. Just because you have good social skills doesn't mean you know how to teach that. So we really use the evidence as a sort of a way of determining that the program is effective, but also we use the research to tell us what do socially successful people do. So that's been part of the development of these programs, is to go back to the research and figure out what works in social situations.
Right. And I think that the fact that it's evidence-based is so important because, I work with a lot of clinicians, and oftentimes we're making recommendations for a social skills group, whether that be for a child who has autism spectrum disorder or ADHD or just social discomfort. But it's really important for parents to really look for programs that do have that evidence-based component, that there is evidence that it works, that it is effective. And it's not just based on what good-meaning adults think will be helpful.
Yeah, we want to be good consumers, right? Even for our mental health care. When you're ordering something on Amazon and you're looking at the reviews, like you're being a consumer.
Right.
Well, this isn't that different. This is actually more important than whatever we're buying on Amazon. So yeah, you want to be a good, smart consumer and really make sure that the programs, whether it's social skills training or not, actually have some basis in evidence and that shows that it's actually effective.
Right. And it shows that it's effective because, again, you're looking at what socially, astute people do and how they engage. And those individuals who are able to establish those friendships and make friendships, we're learning from them and learning what skills are important that we can pass on to children and adolescents who are struggling in those areas.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think another aspect that is a big part of this, the success of this type of a program, has got to include parents. One of the unique aspects about PEERS is that pretty much all of our programs are either parent or caregiver assisted, meaning that parents and other care providers go through the program in tandem with their child. And whether even an adult child, it's the same thing. And the idea is that we want to provide some good social coaching out in the real world. Because, most of these programs are very time limited, right? In PEERS, we're typically about 16 weeks in length. People come once a week for 90 minutes. And that's not a lot of time, in the grand scheme of life. And so we want to train parents and other caregivers to be good social coaches the way that we would be if we were there, to make sure that we're not working at odds with each other, where we're giving them the steps for entering conversations. And they're saying, oh, just go up and say hi. And so that's also another important part of being a good consumer of these types of programs, is making sure that, some kind of parent involvement or teacher involvement, someone needs to be included to provide that additional social coaching.
Absolutely. And I love that the parents are involved in that program. And I think that parents, it also increases their social competence and their ability to feel competent about advising their children about how to be successful in social situations. And then those students and those children also can refer back to their parents, like you said, in real life situations, and be reminded of things that they may have learned in peers, particularly if they've completed the program and they, enter a situation they've forgotten, and introduce themselves, that, the parents can coach them through that.
Completely. Exactly. And there's also other things that parents can do even beyond that kind of social coaching, helping them to get enrolled in extracurricular activities and finding that source of friends, supporting them when they want to have get-togethers, right? With their friends and hang out with their friends outside of those activities. Well, that often involves a lot of parent support behind the scenes.
Absolutely. And, so we've talked about kind of how to help our young people, our teenagers, establish friendships, kind of enter a group, maintain those friendships, the importance of having parents to help coach their children through these situations. We also know that even when students have those skills to be competent to enter those social situations, to make friends, to maintain those friendships, there are a portion of those students who are subjected to bullying. And, we kind of talked about that a little bit at the beginning. And we know that I think the research indicates that as many as 30% of middle and high school students experience or involved in some form of bullying. And that's even higher in a lot of the students that we see who have neurodevelopmental challenges, especially adolescents with autism spectrum disorder. And, I'd love to talk a little bit about that, because I think that's some of the anxiety for students returning to school, is that they got a break from the bullying. Being at home with that remote learning. And I know that schools have been, trying to create these bully-free zones in our schools, but we also need, like you've been saying, to equip adolescents with useful strategies on how to navigate those difficult situations in the moment. And I think, your program also addresses that as well, because that's hard. I mean, students are teased and, people say unkind things, and there's rumors and there's gossip. So, you were kind of flipped the script on me and asked me this question, but I'm thinking about bullying as well. And I'm thinking, what do most adults tell teens to do in response to teasing? What do they tell them to do?
I mean, they give this is probably where kids get the worst advice, honestly. And it's like a global issue, because, we have this program in over 100 countries. And so I do trainings in different places. I always ask the question you just asked me: what are kids told to do in response to teasing? And I am told wherever I go on the planet that kids are told to ignore, walk away, or tell an adult. And then I ask kids if that works. And do you want to guess what they say, Karen?
They say it does not work. And I'd love for you to tell people what's the problem with giving that advice, first of all, and what's a better solution?
Yeah, I mean, let's just walk through this, right? So imagine someone's teasing me and I ignore them. What will they do?
They're going to keep teasing.
Yeah, they're going to keep teasing me, and I look weak because I didn't do anything. So am I more or less likely to be teased by that person?
More likely.
That's right. If I walk away, what will they do?
Follow you.
Yes, they'll follow me and they'll keep teasing me. And again, I look weak because I didn't do anything. Am I more or less likely to get teased by that person?
More likely.
Yeah. Now I go tell an adult. Now what do they want to do? They want to retaliate against me. They want to get back at me. I try to get them in trouble. In all of these situations, I'm actually more likely to get teased. So, first of all, I want to say to your audience, don't feel bad if you've been telling kids to ignore or walk away or tell an adult, because everybody tells kids to do that. That's not actually what socially kind of successful kids do in these situations. The reality is that every kid gets teased. It doesn't matter how popular you are. Every kid gets teased. It's how you react to it that determines how significantly or severely, how chronically you're teased. And by the way, teasing is just one type of bullying. There's actually 4 different types we can get into if you want to, but this is the biggest issue for most kids. And, you mentioned kids in particular with autism spectrum disorder, they're 9 times more likely to be teased and bullied. So this is a very high risk group. So we want to give them the strategies that kids who are able to escape teasing use. And it's actually the simplest strategy that I teach in peers. You just simply give a short comeback that shows that what the person said didn't bother you. So kids will say things like, whatever, or am I supposed to care? Is that supposed to be funny? So what? Big deal. Who cares? They'll roll their eyes. They'll shrug their shoulders. They'll say anyway, and then they'll walk away. But they never walk away until they've given the impression that what the person said didn't bother them. And actually what they said was kind of stupid. And that makes it not fun for the person who's teasing. In fact, it might even embarrass them a little bit. And that's what you want. That is actually what we call an ecologically valid social skill. And I didn't use that term before, but what that means is what socially successful people naturally do. That's what we should be teaching.
And that's really key. Again, thinking about socially successful people, because, we want to give these students the skills so that they too can be successful in navigating different types of social situations, whether that be establishing friendships, maintaining friendships, or addressing bullying. And you mentioned that there are a number of different types. There's also rumors and gossip. And, that's a big one that I hear a lot from middle school students. And that contributes a lot to a lot of anxiety, depression, self-concept issues. Are there strategies that you help students develop that help with rumors and gossip?
Yeah. Well, you know how I said that when it comes to teasing, like this is the worst advice that kids get? Here's the interesting thing about rumors and gossip. It's not even so much about the advice that people get. It's the natural instinct. And one of the things I have about rumors and gossip is that when it comes to rumors and gossip, every instinct we have is wrong. Every instinct we have is wrong. So let's think about this. Let's imagine that there's a rumor about me floating around school. What do I want to do?
You want to prove that it's not true.
I do. I want to deny. I want to disprove that rumor. But every instinct I have is wrong. And what's going to end up happening is I'm going to look guilty because I look defensive. If I go around telling everybody it's not true, don't believe that never happened. I could have a mountain of evidence that it's not true. But there's a whole group of people that are still going to believe it. And I look defensive, which makes me look guilty. So I can't do that. I can't try to disprove the gossip. The other thing is that how does it feel when you're the target of rumors and gossip?
It feels really bad. It feels embarrassing.
Yeah, it's very upsetting, right? And that's a natural instinct, except that every instinct I have is wrong. And if I show people that I'm upset, I look guilty again. So again, you can't show people that you're upset. Now imagine that I know who spread the rumor about me. Let's imagine, Karen, you were the rumor spreader and you spread this rumor about me. What do I want to do?
You want to talk to that person and explain to them that it's not true and to stop telling people that it's true.
Right. So I want to confront the person who started the rumor. But can you imagine what that would look like? Imagine that I thought you're the one who's spreading the rumor. I come up to you and I say, Karen, I know you're spreading this rumor about me. You seriously need to stop. Like, that's not cool. What are you going to do? Are you going to say, oh yeah, Liz, you're right. I shouldn't spread that rumor. Let me go tell everybody it's not true. Don't worry. I've got your back. Like, is that ever going to happen? It's never going to happen. So actually another instinct that we have is wrong, right? I can't confront the person. Mm-hmm. And I also have to really kind of avoid the person who's spreading the gossip because I can't do anything right if I'm even in the same vicinity as you, right? Because what is everybody doing? They're watching us. They're watching, they're waiting, they're secretly hoping that I confront you. So I'm actually adding more, fuel to the rumor mill in all these situations. So instead what we want to do is we want to be proactive about this. We want to take control of these rumors. And so not only are people talking behind our backs when we're the target of a rumor, but they sometimes will come up and ask us about it. And remember that the instinct will be to try to deny or disprove, but you look guilty, so you can't do that. So instead, we teach kids to just simply act amazed. Anyone will believe or care about that rumor. And it doesn't even matter if it's true. If it's true, you can't believe anyone cares about it. And if it's not true, you can't believe anyone believes it. And so kids are saying things like, I don't know, I can't believe people are talking about that. People need to get a life, or people need to find something interesting to talk about. And that's sort of discrediting the importance of the gossip, right? That's discrediting the importance. If you want to discredit the believability, people are saying things like, seriously, people believe that? People will believe anything. People are so gullible, right? And that does not look defensive. That just makes it look kind of silly that anybody even cares about it or believes it. So that's very powerful, but I have an even more powerful strategy. And this I do not think is intuitive at all to most of us, but I call it spread the rumor about yourself, which I know sounds crazy, but I kind of want it to sound crazy because who's going to forget that strategy? Spread the rumor about yourself. Like, why would you do that? So here's how this works. First step is you find an audience, right? So you want people around to overhear this conversation. And so best time during school, when do you think kids are kind of like sitting around talking? Would be a good time.
Right before school starts or lunchtime?
Yeah, exactly. So lunchtime is good, before or after school when people are hanging out. Second step, you find a supportive friend. Now, you're not going to tell your friend you're going to do this. You just, someone that you think would have your back and kind of agree with you. Third step is you acknowledge the rumor. So I might say, hey, Karen, did you hear this rumor that I have a crush on so-and-so? And it doesn't even matter if you know the rumor or not, because the fourth step is I'm going to act amazed that anyone believes or cares about this rumor, right? And you're going to be my supportive friend and be like, yeah, I know, right? That's so stupid. And it's not going to be a long conversation. It's going to be like, did you hear this rumor? I have a crush on so-and-so. And you're going to say, yeah, I did hear that rumor. Like, seriously, people are talking about that. And you're my supportive friend, and you're going to say, yeah, people need to get a life. And I'm like, and by the way, who would even believe that? And you would say, yeah, I know, right? And that's about the extent of the conversation. And then fifth step, by the way, this is the last one, repeat with other supportive friends. Right? You are going to take control of this rumor and show everyone how unimportant it is or how unbelievable it is. And that's about as close as you're going to get to killing that rumor.
Right. And I love that you've given students the language to use, because I think that's part of the problem. They don't know what to say or how to say it. And then you also help them understand how it's powerful and why it matters what they say.
Part of this really important process too is sort of seeing what this is supposed to look like and also what it's not supposed to look like. So doing things like role play demonstrations as part of social skills training is really critical. It's not just enough to talk about social skills. It's important to see what this should look like, but also what it shouldn't look like. Because it's very, again, with rumors and gossip, the instincts are so strong to do the wrong thing that our kids need to see what that looks like when you do the wrong thing. And they'll even get sort of this visceral reaction of like, oh, that wasn't very believable, or that didn't really look very good. And then they have to see the good example. And then, of course, the next part of the formula is that they need to practice these things.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, you're not going to wait until there's a rumor about them to practice this, right? You want to make sure that they're ready and equipped if this does come up.
And that's really kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on this podcast. And you've just shared such valuable information to so many parents who are nervous about their kids going back to school in the fall, particularly those who had social difficulties before the pandemic and may not have been around a lot of children over the past year. And they might be a little nervous about their young people, their teenagers, reentering the in-person instruction in the fall. And so, we have a couple more minutes, and are there any final words for parents who are feeling that nervousness for their children, for their teenagers about returning to in-person instruction, that you can give them to kind of put them a little bit at ease as they prepare for yet another transition?
Yeah. I think that, this is an opportunity for a fresh start. When we teach our families about things like changing a reputation, for example, some of our kids are struggling with bad reputations with their peers. And one of the very first steps in changing a reputation is to lay low, like keep a low profile, kind of go fly under the radar for a little while and kind of, just try to fit in with the social norms of the school. Well, guess what? Everybody's been laying low for the last, year plus. And so this is an opportunity to kind of change that reputation if they're struggling with that. And so the next steps of this laying low, kind of following the crowd. Third step is that you're going to sort of do something to change your appearance, kind of change your look a little bit. Maybe it's a new hairstyle. Maybe it's different clothes. The idea is that you're just trying to give a physical representation that you're different. It doesn't mean there was anything wrong with the look before. It just, you want people to notice there's something different about you. But this is not just a makeover. Fourth step, you got to own up to whatever the previous reputation is. Because what's going to happen is people are going to come up to our kids and they're going to say, oh, look at you with your new hair and your new clothes, but you used to be really annoying, or you used to do this, and they'll tell you what they didn't like. It's a backhanded compliment. And we have to be prepared for that. Because if we just say, oh, no, I wasn't like that, you just didn't know me, then we're not going to get to change our reputation. They're going to think it's the same old, you with the new haircut. So you own up to the reputation. That doesn't mean you have to say I was weird or I was annoying or whatever they didn't like about us. All you have to say is, yeah, I know people thought that about me, but I'm kind of different now. Now it sounds like, yeah, maybe you are different. Now you have an opportunity to find that source of friends, those people that you have things in common with. But for a lot of our kids prior to the pandemic, even though they might have had things in common with people, maybe nobody wanted to be friends with them. If they had a bad reputation, think about that, Karen. What was everybody afraid of? Why would kids not want to be friends with our kid if they had a bad reputation?
Yeah, because they didn't want to be associated with that person because of what other people thought about them.
Yeah. I mean, I think they were afraid of getting the reputation by association. And you do get your reputation based on who you hang out with. So here's the good news for parents, having kids reintegrated back into school this fall. This is a beautiful opportunity to reintegrate them and have a fresh start. And so, utilize that, but help them to give them the tools that they need, with the good advice, the ecologically valid strategies, not what we think they should do in social situations, but what works in reality.
Wonderful. That is great advice. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Laugeson, and for sharing information that I think is not only helpful for parents, but for therapists, for educators. And if people want to learn more about peers and your work, where can they go?
Yeah, I mean, you could just simply go to our website. We're at www.semel, it's semel.ucla.edu/peers.
Wonderful. And I will make sure I put that link in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time and for all the work that you're doing, the incredible research that is really changing the lives of so many students who struggle with these social challenges.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you so much to your audience for listening.
I hope that after listening to this episode, that you feel better equipped to help a teen or a child enter a conversation, engage with peers, establish friendships, and address bullying. If you found this episode helpful, please let me know. Send me an email, drkiwilson@childnexus.com, or DM me on Instagram @childnexuscommunity. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.